Hello, I'm Tim Borden, and welcome to Pickwick Lake. We're right here on the shores of this big Tennessee River impoundment. It is a really, really cool place, very diverse, goes through 3 states. It's full of smallmouth, largemouth, and spotted bass, and it's very diverse in the way that it fishes. Man, I got so many great memories, not only great memories of when I was guiding here and starting in my early 20s, and before I started making it on the Bassmaster Tournament Trail. This place really is where I honed my skills to be able to learn to do a lot of different techniques. And man, you just go back and it's pretty cool. I'll catch myself running down the lake here and I'll remember a day of fishing, 20, 30 years ago, and to be able to go back and reflect and figure out, man, this is where I learned to throw a deep crankbait, one of my favorite ways to fish. This is where I really learned to go flip cypress trees and how bass would relate to it. And to be able to do 2 opposite ends of the spectrum on the same body of water was pretty cool. One thing that's very unique about Pickwick Lake is it runs through 3 states. It starts out here below Wilson Dam in northwest Alabama in the Muscle Shoals area and runs all the way to Pickwick Dam, which is located in Tennessee. So a lake that is located in 3 different states, over 40,000 acres, and very diverse in the way that it fishes is really a cool scenario. Water clarity is a big part of bass fishing, as we all know. And this lake has that good milky green clarity to it. It's clear, but it's not where you can see your lure down real deep. I've always said when you can barely see the foot of your trolling motor when it's in the water, that's a great color to be able to catch bass on. It's not intimidating. You don't feel like the bass are seeing you when you're up close and around the bank and the shoreline. And that's what Pickwick Lake has. When looking at the upper third or the upper section, upstream portion of Pickwick, you're talking about the Tri-Cities area. Really the headwaters, the tail race below Wilson Dam is one of the most popular fishing destinations on this entire lake. And really, you're looking at current. You're looking at how much flow is coming out of the dam, and that can change daily. And it really changes seasonally, with a lot of flow in the springtime and limited flow when you have drought situations in the fall of the year. But they're pretty much gonna move water every day because it's a hydroelectric dam. So TVA is actually generating power through these dams to all of the local residents in the Tennessee Valley. So the upper portion of Pickwick is so much determined by the water release schedule that's coming out. And I'm gonna consider that really from about 7 Mile Island upstream to the Rock Rose in Sheffield, all the way up to what we call the Horseshoe, which is located just below Wilson Dam. And those are some of the most popular areas that really receive a lot of fishing action and really produce a lot of fish. The mid-lake section is gonna be around the Natchez Trace Bridge all the way down to Bear Creek. This part of the lake, you're really starting to get a little bit deeper. You're starting to get a little bit wider, less current flow, and really big, massive flats. This is where a lot of spawning habitat happens, where a lot of the hydrilla and milfoil grows, and people fish the grass beds throughout the summer months. You got buckbrush to flip, you've got grass, you got vegetation, you got gravel bars that the smallmouth get on. Just extremely diverse and all kind of different ways to target fish in this part of the lake. The lower section is where you're going to get from Bear Creek down to the lower part of the dam. There's some great tributaries in this part of the lake. They really get a lot of action in the springtime, from Bear Creek, Panther Creek, Yellow Creek, a lot of places that the fish are just gonna move up and spawn in. A lot of recreation in this part of the lake in the summertime, gets a lot of boat traffic, but the fishing can really be phenomenal. This is really where the ledges of Pickwick Lake come into play when people are offshore fishing in the summer months. When you're looking at species of the largemouth, smallmouth, and spotted bass, let's break that down real quick. The smallmouth are really upriver. They're gonna be where there's the most current. They swim upstream. They're gonna hit Wilson Dam, and that's where they're gonna congregate. A lot of the shell beds and shallow bars throughout the upper part of the lake is also gonna be great for smallmouth fishing. Now, largemouth, is a very diverse species. They can handle low flow, they can handle current by just getting out of it. So they're going to be spread out through the entire lake. Now the spotted bass is a unique species here on Pickwick Lake. There's actually two different types of spotted bass. You got the Tennessee River spotted bass and the Alabama spotted bass. Now the big spots are going to be located on the lower end. You can actually run out of Pickwick Lake into Yellow Creek and go into Bay Springs without ever locking through. It's the 10-tom waterway, and this is where those really large spotted bass are going to be. There's a lot going on here, a lot of great hotels, great restaurants, local cuisine, and the music heritage, you know, is really a big deal here too. So a lot of attractions to see while you're in town. For people coming here, there's a lot of great boat ramps that you can come and access the water. You know, we're right here at McFarland Park in Florence, Alabama. That's one of the more popular ones. You've also got the Rock Pile boat ramp just up above here that's located in the tail race. As you get on down the lake, some of the best ones, I love the Natchez Trace Parkway boat ramp. Very accommodating, very large ramp, has a lot of parking. The only thing I would say about that is that one is not as good in the winter drawdown because it's a little bit shallow there. But any other time, that's a great ramp. Second Creek boat ramp is another great area, a lot of great parking. And then as you get on down the lake, the Tennessee State, Pickwick State Landing there, which is a Tennessee State Park, is another great boat ramp that has a lot of popular attractions to go to as well. You know, in the spring of the year, we've got a lot of different things to look at here. If I'm targeting smallmouth, I'm really going to get on the upriver portion here and get in what we like to call the Horseshoe area. And you can see we've got Wilson Dam here. So what happens with this water flow, it comes out on this side of Jackson Island. You can see I got a lot of waypoints up here, spent a lot of time catching them in this bay that we call the Horseshoe. So think of this, when the smallmouth come upstream and they're up here to spawn, they're going to get in this protected area of the Horseshoe. And also in the current breaks around those areas. This is phenomenal. March, April fishing, just about as good as it gets anywhere in the country. Now, as we're talking about largemouth, we're going to get on down the lake and get some of the backwater areas like Buck Island Chute, any of the areas around 7 Mile Island, Coffee Slough. This is what we've got here, Buck Island Chute. There's a lot of grass, weed beds, big cattails that the bass get up and spawn around in the springtime. Now, as you get on down the lake, especially when you start getting into what I like to call the shad spawn time of the year, which is going to be a late spring, that's when I get around the Cogar Island area. A lot of good shallow bars in that 3 to 5 foot range. From here all the way down to the Natchez Trace Bridge, you're going to see us coming up on it. You see my trails I put in at that boat ramp a lot. But this area has a lot of flats, which is late spring where those bass are really going to get, and early spring. You know, you get down here into Second Creek. This is a place I fished a lot growing up because of the clear water in the back. You could really see bass visually up shallow around these cypress trees, and a lot of man-made structure, a few boat docks back there that can be really good fishing. You know, and then obviously Bear Creek has a lot of good backwater areas, Airplane Hollow, a lot of good different things there that you're going to locate in the spring of the year. Yellow Creek the same way. You know, the springtime on Pickwick, you got to take two things into consideration. Are you fishing for smallmouth? Are you fishing for largemouth? There's a lot of diversity, and that happens with your lures as well. We talk about the diversity, so we're going to talk about smallmouth first. You know, I really like a football jig, like an XPS finesse football jig. The one thing about it, when you're up here around these rocks and these gravel bars, is that it's going to come through it a lot better. When you're thinking about it and you're looking up on the bank here, what we're seeing on the bank is actually what's underwater. There's a lot of broken up rock where these smallmouth are going to be, and that's where they're going to spawn. So a football jig is going to allow you to get through those rocks a lot better. The lure is going to bounce through there a lot cleaner, and that's what that football jig is going to do for you. One of my other favorite techniques in the spring of the year, this is probably my dominant thing that I like to do on Pickwick. It doesn't matter for largemouth or smallmouth, is I like to take an XPS rattle shad and really fish. You know, I love the crawfish boil color. Any of those reds are going to be good and going to work for you. But I fish a lipless crankbait a little different than a lot of people. You know, I really like to fish it on the bottom, almost the way I would a jig. I got my rod tip high and I'm pumping that lure. That's where those bass are going to be in the springtime, especially during the shad spawn. This is the time of year that you're going to catch really big fish schooled up. You know, early in the morning, it's important to get out early in the morning during that shad spawn, but there's just something about that lure, that lipless crankbait coming across those shale beds and those gravel bars, that is just absolutely dynamite on Pickwick Lake. It'll outperform anything. Now, Pickwick is similar to other lakes in the fact that creature baits, crawfish lures are going to dominate around shallow cover. Buckbrush, cattails, weed beds. I really like the log father. You know, I like a basic green pumpkin color. It's really a good color here on Pickwick Lake. But I can take that lure and flip it up around cypress trees. I can go to boat docks and use it. It's very versatile. And crayfish is just a dominant pattern to fish with on this lake anyway. Another great lure is the chatterbait. You know, a bladed jig, if the water is stained up, we're getting a lot of rain, there's just something about a bladed jig that's awesome. I like to take that chatterbait and really fish it around even open water. Places that I'm fishing on those bars when the water's a little bit more cleared up. If we get to stain, which we sometimes do in the spring of the year from a lot of current flow coming out of that dam, that's when I'm gonna go to the chatterbait. We're gonna take a look at the spawn on Pickwick Lake. You know, the smallmouth are gonna start probably early April, the first week or two of April, depending on how quick it gets warm. But you're going to see a lot of fish here in the Horseshoe. These fish that come up river, the smallmouth are always going to spawn close to the current. As you got the current coming here around Jackson Island, you can see I got a lot of waypoints here, obviously, but the smallmouth really get up in here to spawn. But they also get on these shallow bars, these little kickouts like you have right here. As you get on down the river, there's all kind of little drains that create these bars that come out. And when the smallmouth are spawning, they really get around those as well. They're going to be in the current breaks, but they're going to be on the back side of some of that starting to spawn. Now the largemouth are going to spawn more up against the cover. And you've got some incredible areas with great cover on Pickwick Lake. You know, as we get into the largemouth fishing, you're going to have a lot of spawning here around Coffee Slough, around those cypress trees. Now also along the banks here is a lot of cattails, a lot of cover that the bass are going to get around, from buckbrush to cypress trees and cattails as well. Buck Island Chute, another great place that these largemouth are going to move into the spawn. The woodland area, the backwaters here, and all up and down through here, you're going to find bass that are going to be moved back in these backwater areas. Now you can get into late April and May, and you'll even have some largemouth spawning out here on the main river, but for the most part, they're going to move back. Like Second Creek is just a phenomenal area that these fish are going to get in the back of to spawn. Airplane Hollow down here in Bear Creek, a lot of these backwater pockets, anywhere that there's cover, this is where they're going to get. You know, Indian Creek, Panther Creek, Yellow Creek that you see here as you get down into Tennessee. Just look for these backwater areas, you know, where you're going to have boat docks and things like that. Those bass are going to be there spawning. The spawn on Pickwick is very similar to a lot of lakes. You do have the diversity of the smallmouth and the largemouth. I like to take, you know, again, the log father and really take that lure and milk it around these areas. Visually think about a bass being up against cover. You know, one thing you want to think about though on Pickwick is, because of the current, for the largemouth, you got to get in the backwater. Anytime I'm fishing in the backwaters, I want a creature bait, something that I can get softly into those areas. You know, I like to take something light, like a 3 ounce, quarter ounce weight, XPS tungsten weight, and really milk it around the base of those areas, whether it's the cattails, the cypress trees, or whatever it may be. That's where those bass are going to be spawning. Now the smallmouth spawn is going to be a little different. They're going to be close to the current. That's where I like that football finesse jig in the 5/16 ounce. I can really fish it around the rocks, the gravel. It's going to roll and tumble and skirt just like a crawfish, or fish in that rattle shad out and around those bars. Smallmouth are going to be a little bit more aggressive. They protect their nests a lot stronger than largemouth do for the most part. So they're very catchable when you get around them, but they're going to be close to the current, but just outside of it. As you get into the summer months, these are when the bass are really going to get offshore. I don't fish upstream as much that time of year, not as much success up here. For the most part, the big schools of bass, and where most of the success comes from in the summertime, is the mid-lake to lower lake part of Pickwick. You know, you'll have schools anywhere from 10 to 20 feet. I really like to set up on these upstream areas of these corners and these humps, such as this one right here. And just being able to get out and idle around with your electronics and looking for those bass is a really big deal. I really like how they set up on these corners, up on the headwaters of these underwater islands and ledges. And like right here, where a creek channel comes in and hits the main river. Here's another really good one right here. You can see with all kind of places the current is gonna hit it. And just some of the best offshore fishing that you'll find anywhere in the country is right here on the famous ledges of Pickwick Lake. Summertime on Pickwick, think about big schools of fish getting together. Now there are a lot of different ways to tackle this. I either like a football jig, that 3/4 ounce XPS football jig. I love that green pumpkin with a little bit of orange skirt in it. There's something about that green pumpkin orange combination on Pickwick. That's just the dynamite color of the football jig. Again, that 3/4 ounce, it's gonna be a little bit heavier to fish down in that current, and these fish that are gonna be anywhere from 16 to 18 foot of water. Now, my favorite thing to do is deep crank. I'm gonna go with the Bass Pro Shops XPS 16 crankbait. Now, getting down to those 16-foot depths is so important. That's the magic on Pickwick, is being able to get down and hit those ledges. One thing I like to tell people, when you're hunting offshore fish on Pickwick in the summertime, is really find where those creek channels intersect with the main river channel. It's gonna cause a corner, and right where that current hits it is where those fish are gonna be. That XPS 16 crankbait is dynamite for that, or the football jig. Whatever you've got confidence in, those two lures dominate on Pickwick Lake. You know, as we get into the fall of the year, Pickwick is very similar to most reservoirs throughout the Southeast in the fact that a lot of the shad are going to come high on the surface. Now with Pickwick, you're going to have grass beds that are going to become more productive in the fall. And the reason they're more productive in the fall than the other months is because Pickwick Lake gets drawn down in the wintertime. So unlike say a Lake Guntersville where the grass really starts growing February, March, April, the grass gets a really late start here. In some years it's very good, some years we don't have as much grass, so that varies from year to year. But this is topwater season. This is when these fish really get on these big main lake flats, and they'll also get in the backs of the pockets, you know, like Bear Creek, Indian Creek, and some of them. And you'll find schooling action. This is the one time of year when you get back in these bays. Look for the birds, look for the gulls that are flying around, the little terns, things like that that are feeding on these shad that are on the surface of the water.
There we go. Smoked it. Oh, it's a strong one to be no bigger than he is. Outside, that makes him stronger.
Top water is king on Pickwick Lake in the fall of the year. You know, a popper lure is something that I can really cause a lot of commotion. I can really imitate bass blowing up on shad and get a lot of strikes. I like a buzzer beater, any kind of buzz bait. A buzzer beater, I really like the XPS black with a gold blade. Now, when I'm fishing this buzzer beater, I'm looking for targets. This is gonna be grass edges. One big thing that you wanna find where this grass starts and stops. And what I mean by that, you may have a mile stretch of it here on the main river on Pickwick Lake. Let's say you're in the Woodland Stumps area, or you're down around Moontown on the mid-lake area. Those ridges are gonna have a starting point and a stopping point of that. Could be a quarter mile, could be a mile long of vegetation. The beginning and the end of that is where the fishing is going to be the best. You can catch them in between in a lot of places, but those are the places that you want to fish. Winter is a great time to be on Pickwick Lake. You know, I really like the headwaters of the lake this time of year. A lot of fish get upstream and they're really going to get in those current breaks. And what I mean by those current breaks, this is when you can really pinpoint them. A lot of these current breaks, like right here, is where these bass are going to be in the wintertime, and that's going to hold true all throughout the lake. You know, all of these little pockets and mouths of these coves and creeks that they get in, they're going to sit right there in the mouth of it, feeding on those shad as they come by. You know, I can scroll all through down the lake and look at these places. You know, Mulberry, where bass are going to be just inside the pocket but close to the main lake, and that whole situation runs true all throughout the lake. They're going to sit here in the mouth. you know, be tucked, like if you got the current flow coming this way, they're gonna be tucked in back here, kind of close to the current, but not in it. This is the one time of year that the water is actually gonna be warmer out here on the main river than it is back here in these very cold sections, especially when you start getting 20, 30 degree nights. This is all gonna cool down a lot quicker. You know, fishing in the wintertime on Pickwick is about getting out of the current. We're sitting on a place here to demonstrate what we've got, but right behind us is heavy current. Right here is slack water. And those bass are gonna get behind those bars in that slack water. I like a Bass Pro Shops XPS square bill crankbait in colors like the brown crawl. Think about those fish really getting grouped up and sitting in certain areas. You may catch 4 or 5 in a row, you may catch 10 or 15 in a given area. It can be really phenomenal when the floodgates get on. That happens a lot in January, February, even in late December. And when it gets stained up and those floodgates get on, they really get all pushed here. But when it gets cold in the wintertime, a lot of people think go deep, like a Clearwater lake, like Table Rock. That's not what you want to do on Pickwick. It's still going to have that stained up water. The bass are going to be shallow. Get you a square bill crankbait and you're going to have some unbelievable action here in January and February. Pickwick Lake, one of the most diverse fisheries in the country. It's really special to me, and I hope these tips are going to help you when you come here to be able to catch more fish.